But our keynote speaker today is Vivek Ramaswamy, and he is a wonderful leader on fighting back against wokeness in America and against ESG, among many others. But rather than me list off his accomplishments, we thought it would be good to show a short video to learn more about Vivek.
Biotech entrepreneur and author of Woke Inc.
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy.
Went to Harvard, went to Yale Law School. He made a pile in biotech.
You founded a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, or several of them. You led a biotech company. You became a hedge fund partner in your 20s.
But other than that...
Right. You've accomplished a lot. Why are you pulling back the curtain? Why is it important for us to know what's really happening?
These companies pretend like they care about something other than profit and power, precisely to gain more of each. The problem with signaling your virtue is at some point the appearance of virtue becomes more important than being virtuous itself. And if you actually care about black lives, then the thing you're going to say isn't just chanting Black Lives Matter and say clear the jails. You're going to actually implement policies that prevent not only black people, but all people in this country from getting killed. I'm a millennial, right? People my age and younger, we are hungry for a cause. We are hungry for purpose. I think we're hungry for identity, but I think mixing morality with consumerism is the wrong way to actually fulfill that hunger. And I think we need to be talking about these issues from sports to academics to our culture, going after excellence unapologetically. That is what it means to be American. Let's not be shy about talking about it. That's what we need to revive across all races, across all skin colors. That's part of what makes us American.
I love it, and I'm glad that you're leading these conversations.
There's one reason these migrants are looking across the border. It is because we have a weak president in office. And when America is weak, the world is a less safe place. And we're seeing firsthand on video through live footage that you just put up the fact that weakness actually begets danger here at home and on the world stage.
Wow, I had to write that down. I do often take notes when you're talking, but usually not quite this obviously. When America is weak, the rest of the world is less safe.
The rest of the world is less safe. Absolutely. Mark my words, from Afghanistan to the southern border of Texas. I actually happen to be in Texas. This is what we should hold Facebook accountable for, though, and I want to be really precise about it. I think we should hold them accountable for their rampant institutional lying. They say one thing, they do another. I think there's a good case for consumer fraud. The definition of consumer fraud is telling consumers you to do one thing and actually doing another. This is a powder keg waiting to explode if we say go to minority communities first, and then God forbid something even appears to go wrong. I think this could be one of the dangerous mistakes of our century if we really use this moment to racialize the distribution of a public good.
That is such a wise point. That is exactly right.
And the thing about America as a country is that we are not, like many other countries through human history, defined on the basis of a single ethnicity or a single language or a single monarch for that matter. America is an idea. And part of being an idea as a country means this: the way we describe America affects the way that America actually works.
Well, look, when I see those images of people protesting, I don't see vaccines of COVID-19 being at the heart of the issue. I see public trust in our leaders as being the heart of that issue. Democracy is not about just casting some ballot every November. It is about the health of a democracy. It's all about people being willing to share their actual opinions in public, in the open. And when we threaten people with getting kicked off a team, with losing their job, with failing their classes for having the wrong opinion, then the health of our democracy right now is abysmal. Complexity favors the people who are well-connected. So in a certain sense, this is just what we've always seen all along, is the well-connected are using a smokescreen of woke values to cover up for a complex system that, the same reason as the federal tax code's complicated, it helps those who are in power. You know that as well as anybody.
That is such a great point.
Today's keynote speaker, Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek, woo!
Thank you. I appreciate that warm welcome. We'll actually tell you part of my story that I haven't told very much in the last couple of years, but I think it relates to what I'm going to talk about, which is the choices we get to make. Okay, and I think we have a lot of choices to make as individuals and as a country in the couple of years ahead of us. I had to make a choice a couple of years ago when I was a biotech CEO, and it was when I first noticed there was something going badly wrong in this country. Okay, I built a company from scratch. I started it in 2014. Thought I was on a mission to develop medicines for patients who needed them. Ended up working on a number of medicines. 5 of them are FDA-approved products today. I'm incredibly proud of that. But in 2020, landing on the doorstep of my company was a demand that I'd never faced. It was after George Floyd's tragic death, okay? And what the demand on my doorstep was that we were to sign a statement of support or make an announcement in favor of the Black Lives Matter movement. This was difficult for me. This was different than anything I'd faced. Developing drugs, that I knew what that was going to be about. But facing this demand to say something I didn't mean as a condition for doing the thing that a business leader in that time was supposed to do, that was a difficult choice. I chose not to do it. I made a statement to our company that said, you know what? The thing that we're doing that actually matters is making medicines for patients who need them. That's the way we make the world a better place, and we're going to leave politics to the politicians so that we can unify around our mission. Thank you. I'm glad those in this room agree. It actually stirred up some controversy. There was something of an uprising on the back of that, and that was the beginning of a 6-month journey that culminated in the following January in 3 prominent members of my advisory board stepping off ceremoniously in the same week. And I had to face a choice. Was I going to speak through the filter of corporate self-interest, where I could say mostly what I needed to say as a citizen, but not everything, not issues relating to race, gender, sexual orientation, stakeholder capitalism, or ESG? Or would I actually be able to speak freely as a citizen? And that was a difficult choice, but in January of 2021, I chose to step down from my job as a biotech CEO to focus not on prostate cancer, which is one of the areas where we had developed a medicine that's approved today, but to focus on a different kind of cancer. This cultural cancer in America that's really taken the form of a secular religion in our country. This is really the essence of what's going on in America today. Okay. We have a new church that's in charge. It's not a church of Christ. It's a different kind of church. It's like a modern Spanish Inquisition in America. There's a few commandments to this religion. One of its commandments is that your identity is based on your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation, full stop. That if you're black, you're inherently disadvantaged. That if you're white, you're inherently privileged. No matter your economic background or your upbringing, your race and your gender govern who you are, what you can achieve in life, and even what you're allowed to think. This is a form of psychological slavery. What this religion actually says is that the color of your skin determines even the content of the ideas you're allowed to espouse. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of the Squad actually summarized this pretty well. She's one of the apostles of this religion. What she says is, we don't want any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. Think about that for a second. What that means is that when your race goes from being about your skin color to being about the content of the ideas you're allowed to have, then any disagreement with those ideas automatically makes you a racist. And there is no greater damnation in modern America than to be called a racist. So when given the choice between pledging allegiance to this new religion and being tarred with the scarlet R, that's when everyday Americans start to bend the knee. And that's created this new culture of fear in America that I'll come back to. Before I come back to that, let's take a look. There's a second commandment to this religion that's now emerged in recent years, which relates to your gender identity. It's a new religion that allows you, that requires you to simultaneously believe 2 things together that don't make sense. The first thing it requires you to believe is that the sex of the person you're attracted to is hardwired on the day that you're born. It had to be, or else it couldn't have been counted as a civil right. But it also says that your own biological sex is completely fluid over the course of your life. These 2 things are incompatible if you're operating on principles of reason, but if you're operating on principles of faith, it works. And then there's another move that this religion makes, actually, too. So a friend of mine, Peter Thiel, he's gay. He's a man attracted to men. There's reason, what was it? It was The Advocate magazine, shortly after he spoke at the RNC, published an article saying that Peter Thiel is not gay because he does not represent the gay voice. It's the same thing that Ayanna Pressley said. So you're going to see a pattern here. And then that brings us to the doorstep of the third funny little secular religion that's emerged. Jason did a good job of talking about it. That is the new climate religion in this country. This one seems like it has some staying power unless we do something about it, which also requires us to embrace these contradictory assumptions at the same time. One of those assumptions is that we should not produce fossil fuels here in the United States, that we have to adopt emissions caps and net zero standards if you're Chevron or Exxon. But that it's perfectly fine, even for global climate change, for that same oil production to be picked up by places like Russia or PetroChina on the other side of the planet. You would think that if it was really about the climate, they would have something to say about that. But actually, I'm going to give you some clues here. There's something else going on. You would think that that movement that was so hostile to carbon emissions might embrace the best-known form of carbon-free energy production known to mankind, which is nuclear energy. And yet that same movement and its apostles in the ESG movement are hostile to nuclear energy. Why? Because nuclear energy might actually be too good at solving their supposed problem, even if you subscribe to the tenets of this religion, which means they no longer use it as a Trojan horse to advance their agenda. So what the heck is going on here? Right? Something's gone wrong. Something's in the water in our country. We see the rise of these secular religions all at the same time. What's actually happening? What's happening in our country is that we're in the middle of a national identity crisis. We're hungry for a cause. We're hungry for purpose and meaning and identity at a point in our national history when the things that used to fill that void, faith, patriotism, hard work, family, these things have disappeared in modern American life. We instead replace that void with wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, COVIDism. They're preying on our insecurities, right? We hunger as human beings, as Americans, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Yet we cannot even answer the question of what it means to be an American today. That is the black hole at the center of our nation's soul. And when you have a vacuum that runs that deep, that is when poison begins to fill the void. Okay? I think this is a problem in our country. But I also think it is an opportunity for the conservative movement in America to rise to that occasion. And I think if there's one North Star for what our movement needs to deliver in the next couple of years, and I don't think we have a lot of time we're working with here, but in the next couple of years, if we're going to deliver one thing, we're going to fill that vacuum with a vision of American national identity that runs so deep that it dilutes this woke poison to irrelevance. Thank you. So what does it mean to be American? It means you believe in merit. That you get ahead in this country not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. That is why I believe it should be at the top of the conservative agenda. I've pledged, as many of you know, I'm a candidate for President of the United States. I've pledged to do something that we haven't done in 50 years in this country. End affirmative action. Full stop. This is something that leaders in our country can do. It was created by an executive order. It can be ended by an executive order. Lyndon Johnson put that on the books. A lot of people don't know this, actually. Like most bad things in the country and our culture, a lot of it starts with the actions of the federal government. 60 years ago, we passed an executive order that requires 20% of the U.S. workforce to work for private companies that are required to adopt race-based quota systems. This is wrong. Every president, including Republican president, since then could have taken a pen and crossed it out. What I think we need to do is we need to abandon our culture of fear of addressing these issues head on. I don't care if you're black, white, brown, or anything in between. If you speak truth, you need to state a truth to say that America's a country where you get ahead based on merit instead of de facto racism. That is the systemic racism that actually exists in America, and we need to end it. Thank you. What does it mean to be American? It means that you don't apologize for your pursuit of excellence. And how do we apologize for our pursuit of excellence? It is by bowing to this new climate religion in America. Also at the top of a conservative agenda, I'm going to say what you're not supposed to say out loud. We will abandon that climate religion in our country that shackles the United States while leaving places like China untouched. What does it mean to be American? It means that you believe in free speech and open debate as our way of settling our political differences. You know something? Free speech is a precondition for truth in this country. Think about the number of things that were censored over the last couple of years. From the origin of COVID, 2 years ago, you said it originated in a lab in China. You couldn't say it on social media. Now we know it to be true. 2 years ago, you couldn't argue against school closures without being shut down on the internet. Now we know that we actually created the systemic inequity of a generation by telling kids in public schools that they could not go to school. We would have gotten to those answers more quickly if we allowed for free speech and open debate in this country. But I'll tell you this about free speech, too, and our founding fathers knew this. They knew more about our moment than we know about our own moment today. They knew that free speech is not just a precondition for truth in America. Free speech is actually a precondition for peace in America. If you tell people they cannot speak, that is when they scream. You tell people they cannot scream, that is when they tear things down. Free speech is a requirement for a diverse democracy to work. And what we see in America today, it isn't the thing that people worried about in the last century. It isn't just government direct censorship. But it isn't what many of us conservatives like to call it either. It's not big tech censorship. I don't call it what it is. I don't call it big tech censorship. I call it what it really is, which is government tech censorship. What it is right now is the government is using private companies to censor through the back door what government itself could not get done through the front door under the Constitution. And Brooke knows this well. She's been on this as I have for the last couple of years. If it's state action in disguise, the Constitution still applies. These companies ought to be bound by the First Amendment if they're working hand in glove with the government to do its dirty work. That's actually what it means to bring those principles into the 21st century. Thank you. And that culture of censorship, it's not just limited to the internet. The number of people in this country who were fired in the last few years for wearing the hat of the wrong political candidate. I'll say who it was. Donald Trump is who it was. Wearing the Donald Trump hat to work. Number of people who attended the wrong political rally. Number of people who posted the wrong thing on social media who were fired for it. That's staggering. It's un-American. It is anti-American. That's why I say, you know what, we need to go further. We need to not just imitate Ronald Reagan by saying the things he said, but channel his spirit of waking up to actually the real threats to liberty in our day, which in the realm of censorship means that we've got to make political expression a civil right in this country. To say that, you know what, thank you very much. To say that if you can't fire somebody for their race, or their sex, or their sexual orientation, or their religion, or their national origin, you should not be able to fire somebody or deplatform somebody for their political speech either. That is what it means to be an American, too, that you don't have to choose between speaking your mind freely and putting food on the dinner table. America's the quintessential nation on earth where you get to enjoy both of those things at the same time. Now, I'll tell you, a lot of conservatives have some trouble with this one. I did myself. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have told you the same thing. Why? Because you say that the free market should solve these concerns. You know what? If these businesses are firing those great conservatives over here, that's an opportunity for these other businesses to hire them instead. And we shouldn't want to add one more regulation that a private business has to deal with, now saying they can't fire somebody on the basis of political viewpoints. Well, you know what I say? That makes pretty good sense if you're actually applying that standard even-handedly. But you can't have it both ways. To say that you can't fire somebody, we don't trust the market for whether they're black or gay or Muslim or white or Jewish or Hindu or whatever, but somehow you can fire them for being an outspoken conservative. And actually what happened in this country, like most things, it actually started with the federal government. We passed those civil rights statutes thinking that we were doing good. Well, what happened is they were interpreted so broadly that they actually came to mean that, you know what, the Civil Rights Act, the way it's interpreted today, the way it's enforced today, I've run a company, so I've seen this firsthand. You know how it works is it says you can't discriminate on the basis of race or sex or sexual orientation. But actually, that's now interpreted to mean you cannot even create what's called a hostile work environment for somebody who's a member of a protected class. So now, okay, you might wonder, what does that mean? How do you create a hostile work environment? Turns out that one of the ways you can be legally liable for creating a hostile work environment is allowing someone else to express viewpoints that a member of a protected class disagrees with. Or even worse, allowing someone to continue to work at the company who's made those comments on their own time. I'm not making this up. This is the stuff of cases that have found their way in front of the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. I'll say that if the law itself created it, it's the responsibility of the law and for policymakers to fix it. And I think that can be actually unifying in this country. To revive the idea, we don't make you choose between the American dream and the First Amendment. We're the quintessential nation on earth that allows you to enjoy both of those values at the same time. This is what helps us rediscover what it means to be American. Being American means we believe in the rule of law. All right, and I say this as a kid of immigrants myself, okay? My parents came to this country. They came through the front door. They followed the rules. They paid their taxes. They actually raised 2 kids, both of whom went on to found companies that helped thousands of Americans. They taught us that starting a family, getting married, having kids involves a sacrifice. But certain sacrifices are worth making, okay? Life is about more than just the meaningless passage of time. This is what my immigrant parents taught me. I say this as a kid of immigrants. Even if we, I believe, should welcome more immigrants just like them, it means saying a hard no to anyone whose first act of entering this country is a law-breaking one. That, too, is what it means to be American. That's not racist. You say that without apology. And by the way, the use of a U.S. military, what was it created to do? The U.S. military was created to protect Americans on American soil. My view is it is a proper use of the U.S. military itself to protect our, who would have ever thought, our own border, foremost above any other nation on earth. What does it mean to be American? It means you don't apologize for these things, right? If we're suffering from a fentanyl crisis where there's 100,000 cases of fentanyl-related deaths per year, 80% of which are the result of southern border crossings that were intentionally designed to undermine the United States, supplied by actually Chinese suppliers who have actually made that much cheaper for cartels, who in a business model now are able to make more money as a consequence of pumping that fentanyl across the border. It means a proper use of the U.S. military to protect Americans on American soil by even using our military force to decimate any threat to Americans on American soil, including use against the Mexican drug cartels without apology. That, too, is part of what it means to be American. Thank you. So my view is if we do these things, okay, if we revive those basic ideals that set this nation into motion, my favorite one, one that's near and dear, I know, to many of your hearts here, is reviving the basic idea that the people we elect to run the government ought to be the people who actually run the government, rather than this cancerous federal bureaucracy. That's not a Democratic idea. It's not a Republican idea. Maybe I voted for a different guy we elect runs the government. At least let it be the people we elect. That's not the case in America today. Actually, what exists in America today is it's a cancerous federal bureaucracy and permanent state that actually runs the show, that views these elected leaders as cute little puppets who we view as inconveniences that will pass like a passing storm, when actually the people who run the show are an aristocracy that views themselves as actually more enlightened than the people who we, the citizenry, elect. Now, thank you. I take a solid view on this. They'll say you can't, you know, I bring a private sector perspective to this, actually. I ran a biotech company. I've run other companies. I'll tell you a really simple lesson. It helps you interpret the Constitution. Sometimes the practicality helps you interpret this thing we call our Constitution. If somebody works for you, and you cannot fire them, it means they don't actually work for you. It means you work for them. It actually means you are their slave because you're responsible for what they do without any power over what actually happens. So I'm the fool who's running for the office where that's actually the case today, but we got to change that. That's the point. You know what? The Constitution empowers a chief executive who runs this country and runs every state in this country to do what a true chief executive is empowered to do when somebody reaches beyond their constitutionally ordained scope. You fire them, you fire the managerial industrial complex around them, and you actually even shut down the agencies for which they work. They will say, thank you. Now, this is easier said than done. They will say there's these civil service protections, right? Oh, well, you know, you can't fire them. They will say that, okay, there's this boring stuff. There's an Impoundment Prevention Act in 1974 that says if Congress allocates money to the president has to spend it even if the president knows that's going to be a wasteful use of money. There's all of these, there's a lot of baggage that on the books tells you that a president of the United States or even a governor of a state can't do these things. You know what? I take a strong view of this thing we call the Constitution, which says that Article 2 of the Constitution says that U.S. president, the people you elect, the people we elect to run this country, actually are empowered to run it. I view all of those statutes as measured against Article 2 of the Constitution as unconstitutional. We actually need to take a stronger view of executive power as enshrined in the Constitution. And guess what? Thanks to the work of a lot of people in this room and other ones across this country, we have a Supreme Court that today, in contrast to 20 years ago, has a majority of them on there who take a similar view as well. We can actually win this in this short window we have to enshrine for once and all in this country that the people we elect to run the government will be the people who actually run the government. Replace these federal civil service protections with 8-year sunset clauses instead, to say that if I can't work for the federal government for more than 8 years as a president of the United States, then neither should most of those federal bureaucrats either. And we actually do something that should have started 50 years ago, but better late than never. We actually start by shutting these things down, starting with the Department of Education, onto the FBI, and 3-letter acronyms all the way down from there. You create something new to take its place. That, too, is what it means to be American. And I think if we do these things, if we're willing to muster the strength to do what hasn't been done for 40 years in this country, then we can take on the actual external threat we face, okay? That's the number one threat. I know yesterday was Texas Independence Day. Well, you know what the Declaration of Independence of our century is a declaration of independence from China. If Thomas Jefferson were alive in America today, that is the Declaration of Independence that he would sign. We are dependent on an enemy, and I use that word intentionally. People say I'm not supposed to say it that way. I'll say it exactly how it's true. We are dependent on an enemy for our modern way of life. And that's different than anything we faced in the last Cold War. We did not depend on the Soviet Union for the shoes on our feet or the phones in our pockets. Today, we're in a codependent relationship with our top rival. Okay, how we got here, it's a long story. I do know how we got here, but we'll save that for another day. Henry Kissinger, okay, if you told him back then that we were going to be 50 years later in a co-equal relationship with China, we would have thought that was a joke. China would have said that's a best-case scenario, yet that's where we are today. Codependent relationships in life or in geopolitics do not end well. Okay, the only question is who ends it first. The sooner we end it, the better for us. The later we end it, the better for them. I'm calling for total decoupling from China. That will actually involve, I appreciate the applause, I do, but I'm going to be really honest about it. That is not going to be easy. That will involve some real sacrifice. Remember what my parents told me, it's true. Some things involve sacrifice, but you can make those sacrifices if you know what you're sacrificing for. There's easy stuff we can do. Sure, abandon that climate religion, great. That's one competitive advantage that China's using versus us. Okay, that's the easy stuff. But you want to go up the chain. There's even easier stuff, too. You want to tell kids, okay, you can't smoke an addictive cigarette by the age of 18. I'm pretty sure you should not be using addictive TikTok by the age of 15 either. That's easy. Federal ban, I don't think it's that complicated. Okay, that's the easy stuff. But we get to the harder stuff. Using every financial lever available to us to deliver accountability for the COVID-19 pandemic, or else you can expect worse in the future. Get to the really hard stuff. Thank you. Or else you can expect even worse in the future. That's just the way it works. But get to the really hard stuff. You're not supposed to say this. I've been advised not to say this stuff, okay? It's not good for my political career, okay? I've been told, but I don't care. It needs to be said. Ban most U.S. businesses from doing business in China until the CCP either falls or reforms its behaviors, full stop. Now here's the secret. Here's the secret in this. If you're willing to make a sacrifice, that's the case in which you probably will never have to actually make one. Because China's actually weak right now. Xi Jinping did what autocrats do, took a third term. In October, it was all about him. It was all about hubris. It wasn't even about the Chinese nation. He shot the Chinese nation in the foot. Their economy is actually suffering. We have an opportunity. It's standing in plain sight. If we can get over our addiction to buy cheap stuff, feeding our own addiction to, you got the actual fentanyl from China coming across the southern border, digital fentanyl from TikTok, financial fentanyl in the form of national debt. If we're able to overcome our own addiction to China, we can actually get this done in this short window, but it's got to take some calculated risks. It requires some level of boldness, a little less Chamberlain, a little more Churchill in America, a little less on electoral cycles, more on the timescales of history. We can actually do this. We can declare independence as Thomas Jefferson would have. Yes, it involves preparedness to make some sacrifice, but you have to know, what are we sacrificing for? It is for this thing we call America in this country. Okay, thank you, we have a choice to make. And I think that, I'm not talking about the electoral process or anything today. That's for another day in another setting. But I think we do have a choice as a conservative movement and for those of us who are Republicans here. Are we on a path to a national divorce? Or are we on a path to a national revival? I think that's the choice of the next 18 months. And it isn't going to happen automatically. Whichever one we pick, it's going to happen because we chose it to be so. I'll tell you how national unity isn't going to come about in this country. Okay, national unity isn't going to come about by somebody showing up in the proverbial middle saying, can't we all compromise, hold hands, and get along, guys, and sing Kumbaya? That ain't going to happen. If that was ever going to happen, that ship has long sailed. But it's not going to happen by just pummeling the other side into the ground either. I've done plenty of that myself over the last 3 years. It's become almost too easy. That's not going to actually drive a national revival either. Both of those are paths to the national divorce. The way we deliver national unity in this country is by embracing the extremism, the radicalism of the ideas that set this nation into motion 250 years ago. These are radical ideas. Free speech, unbridled meritocracy, rule of law, unapologetic use of military to protect our own borders. The idea that we are governed by the people who we elect rather than people who gather in the back of palace walls or in the back rooms of Park Avenue. Those are the basic ideals that set this nation into motion. And you know what? These are radical ideas. For most of human history, it was done the other way. But in 1776, we decided, for better or for worse, we do it differently on this side of the new world. And if we can revive those common ideals across our diversity, we celebrated our diversity so much. Our diversity and our differences. Our diversity is our strength, they say. No, our diversity is not our strength. Our strength is what unifies us across our diversity. E pluribus unum. From many, one. You see, that is the dream that won the American Revolution. That is the dream that reunited us after the Civil War. That is the dream that won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is the dream that still gives hope to the free world today. And if we can revive that dream over fractious group identity or grievance, that nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus is going to defeat us. That is what American exceptionalism is all about. And that is what we will revive in order to save this great nation. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless your families. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.